Step into the realm of the unexplained with Paranormal M. Hit that subscribe button and enable notifications to stay connected to our latest stories that will ignite your imagination. Get ready for a journey like no other. Child Shadow Figure. Columbus, Ohio. About 3 years ago, I moved in with my girlfriend, and now fiancé. It took a couple of months to really settle in and feel comfortable. But when I did, I started noticing things. We have a third bedroom that has a bed in it, and the dog has pretty much commandeered that room for her own liking. Our bedroom door doesn't really fully close because the strike plate is a bit off-center, but we like it that way, so we can hear things downstairs. At night, I started to get a feeling like something was watching me through the crack in the door. My body would get the chills, and that uneasy feeling would come over me that I need to fight or run. This happened about once a week or so. One night I was in bed, and I had to use the restroom. On the way across the hall, I noticed the dog was not in her room, but instead, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow figure of a child, standing just past the doorway. It was more like a 4-foot black mass that had some resemblance of a child. No features. I could feel its presence too, like when I would feel like I'm being watched through the bedroom door. I did a double take, but it was gone. I started to see this shadow figure almost every time I walked to the restroom. It freaked me out, especially when you aren't expecting it. It must be scaring the dog too, because she doesn't go in there at night anymore at all. My fiancé doesn't even want to talk about it because it frightens her. She's never seen this entity. We have crucifixes about every entrance to the house, and she smudged it with sage. I'm not sure that kind of thing helps, but I rolled with it. The house was built in the 1920s, and it sat vacant for 40 years, so who knows what moved in. There were 2 families here before us, and one of them left a family photo album underneath the basement stairs. The couple had 2 girls and 1 boy. The pictures looked like they were from the 70s. We threw the photo album away, and I haven't seen the shadow figure since. It's been about 9 months since I've seen it last, about the time that we found and tossed the photos. Maybe there was a connection. We did research on the home, and there's not much detailed info except for the 40-year vacancy. I don't get that uneasy feeling anymore when going across the hallway. I'm hoping it moved on. Valleydale Ballroom. 2018, Columbus, Ohio. Valleydale Ballroom. I have to give you some background, and for short, Valleydale Ballroom will be shortened to VDB. Well, the narrator's just going to say it. Valleydale Ballroom was built in the 1800s, and it was used as a stagecoach repair building, so the place is quite old. Over the years, it has flooded inside multiple times. It's because of a river that runs next to the property. In the 1920s, it was turned into a ballroom and a dance hall, and even our first radio station, where they would broadcast live music. The greats have all played there: Frank Sinatra, Glenn Miller, the Big Brass, and swing eras. The walls are lined with pictures of celebrities and old pictures of the building. The lower ballroom has a kitchen in the back, bar, and a huge wood dance floor. The upstairs had a balcony that ringed the entire building, about 12 feet wide, and another bar, and through a doorway was a woman's dressing room with mirrors and an old-fashioned round light bulb lining them with stools in the front. In 2018, the Valleydale Ballroom floods again, and I'm working for a small construction company that's repairing the damage to the walls, the floors, and even the dance floor. A lot of the times I was there by myself, and I never really felt comfortable. I would see dark figures dart around corners and hear conversations being had at the upstairs bar. and this is while I'm working on fixing the dance floor. You can't make out what's being said in the conversations at the bar, but it sounds like 2 or 3 people mumbling with muffled words. My tools that I were using would sometimes be in a place that I wouldn't put them. For example, a pair of pliers that I was using 5 minutes ago on the dance floor were found on the balcony upstairs in the middle of the floor. Dishes could be heard clanging in the kitchen, and there were no dishes at this point. So I'm pretty convinced that the place is haunted. When you know, you know. It's the hair raising on your arms, the panicked feeling, scared, and all you want to do is step outside before working up the nerve to go back in. My best friend worked with me. I'm telling him all about what I'm witnessing in the Valleydale ballroom, and of course, he thinks I'm nuts, being a skeptic and all. So one day, me and the boss go to the hardware store, leaving my friend to work alone in the woman's dressing room upstairs. The floorboards needed replaced, and he started tearing them up when we left to go get materials. When we came back, we find him standing in the parking lot, cussing and walking back and forth frantically. I asked him what happened, and he proceeded to tell me that when he was working, he thought he heard us come back and walk upstairs. He called out a few times and no one answered. When he looked up, he saw someone or something walk past the mirror in front of him. He called out again, but no answer. He looked up once more, noticing movement behind him in the mirror. This time he saw it. He said it was a black void the shape of a person with a fuzzy outline. He freaked out and screamed, but when he turned around, no one was there. He noped out of that place as fast as he could and never went back inside. He was so mentally distraught that we stopped working for that entire day and he went home and freaked us all out. I believe him considering my experiences at Valleydale Ballroom. And if you live in Columbus, go check the place out. They still have weddings and school dances there. But if you're there alone, it's a completely different feeling of the place lost in history and spirits revisiting the good old days. It feels playful, curious, and a little bit sinister all at the same time. I'm sure I saw something this night. So I was watching the night sky at around 1 a.m., just observing and feeling aligned with the universe, and sending love to whoever might be out there. Then I said, just in my head, something like, "Please, can I see the truth? Could something just be shown just to me?" Right the second after, a star has fallen straight in front of me, and when the tail of it faded, another light source sort of popped out of nowhere, right above where the star, or meteorite, fell. It was a round, constant yellowish light, flying obliquely to the right. Firstly, I thought it was just a faster plane, but it didn't emit any other lights just like planes do, and I could tell that it was rather different kind of light than from planes as well. But mainly, planes are flying straight, right? Well, this thing was moving in one direction, but it was kind of hovering from side to side, up and down, like if you had a sparkler in your hand and tried to make a line in the air with it, but your hands were a bit shaky. A drone, maybe, I thought. But it flew behind the clouds, which were over the horizon and pretty high up. Also, the distance that it covered must have been long. I find it pretty funny that my first experience with a possible ET has happened only just yesterday. When I went to bed after that, I also felt something that I'd never felt before. Mainly in my head, I felt pressure, but very light. I felt kind of like being healed. Not just my forehead, but like my whole brain was soaked in warm, loving juice. I don't know, but the whole evening was pretty surreal. The Hat Man. Basically, like 2 years ago, I was at my girlfriend's house. There's a hallway which ends with a bathroom on one end, At the other end is my girlfriend's room and her sister's room. We were just chilling in the bed, and I said that I have to go to the bathroom. It was dark outside, I believe, but there were several light sources, as I remembered that I had a pretty clear view. Right at the closing doors, some black figure entering the bathroom. It really seemed like he had a hat and a cloak. But hey, I'm not crazy, right? I thought that I just badly saw my girlfriend's sister. So I returned to the bed, and after like a minute, my girlfriend was on the phone and not really paying attention, said something like, why I didn't go to the toilet. I answered, obviously because your sister went in. Then I felt like I was in a classic horror movie. As she replied, but my sister isn't home at the moment. Nobody is except us. It hit me really hard. I clearly know what I saw, I swear. I was totally freaked out. And that peeing was one of the worst and fastest ever. When I really had to afterwards. Luckily, nothing happened, though. Until a year later. It was a bright day and warm outside. I was waiting for one of my best friends at the moment in front of his flat. He lives in a block at like the 7th floor. Each floor has a big hall with an elevator, and then a small side one with a balcony divided by stairs. I was in the small one, expecting to hear him and jump at him or some shit, I don't know. But I've waited and he's still nowhere. So I decided to sneak on him through the doors with my ears. But as I turned, I could see the floor underneath, through the space between the stairs. And I saw a black cloaked figure entering the elevator, right as the door slammed. Which, the sound I clearly heard too. Again, I thought to myself that I only dreamed that, and waited in front of his doors. Only to hear the sound of the elevator opening beside me, and his, "The fuck you doing here?" I tried to tell him what I just witnessed, but both of them were saying that I'm just going nuts. But I know what I've seen. I did a bit of research, and I know that this figure shows up in people's dreams, sleep paralysis and things like that. But I'd love to know if someone of you guys have had a similar life experience. I've even heard that people often see this figure when they were having bad energy or something bad going on, which at the time, with both of them, kinda did. Both of the situations were pretty similar, and in both of them, I just felt like my whole world is cracking when they revealed what's going on. Something weird happened at my kid's pediatrician's office. Please convince me I'm just crazy. So for a bit of backstory, I grew up in an extremely haunted house for 17 years. No one will ever convince me that that house wasn't haunted, or that paranormal experiences always have a quote-unquote logical explanation. Always having a logical explanation is not really my own truth. In the past year or so, there have been a few questionable things that have happened in that house, and the one that I live in now. Mostly just things flying off specific tables in a specific dresser. But anyway, I took my youngest son to the doctor's a few weeks ago. We're in the waiting room waiting for the doctor to come in, and I'm standing there holding my son, singing to him. There's a counter with glass jars filled with cotton balls and tongue depressors with metal lids, you know the ones. And one lid was off the jar and sitting on the counter. At some point, I noticed some sort of movement in my peripheral vision, and when I look at the counter, the metal lid is slowly moving by itself. It moved about 5 or 6 inches across the counter right before my fucking eyes. Kinda froze for a minute, wondering if it actually happened or if I'm just crazy. And then I picked the lid up to make sure there wasn't a big bug underneath it or something. By the way, there wasn't. And then the doctor came in, and I pretended nothing happened, of course, and we just left. The really weird thing is that when I first looked and saw the lid slowly sliding across the counter, it took me a second to even realize something was wrong and it shouldn't be moving. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's possible that it somehow is just in my head, but I really do not think so. There were no vibrations, at least that I could feel, or anything like that. There was a sink next to it, so I would assume pipes. And I thought maybe someone used one of the sinks in the room next to mine and it made it move. I just don't know because I'm like 5 or 6 inches is a lot for something like that to move by itself. My house is haunted and I need help. So my family built a house back in 2014 in a rural area, and ever since we moved, we've all experienced paranormal activity. I was in 6th grade when we moved into the house. I'm a senior now. And as soon as we moved in, I felt depressed. At first, I thought it was just hormonal puberty stuff, but every time I left the house, it felt like a weight was lifted off my chest. My dad was very angry all of the time, and my mom seemed absent every time that I would talk to her. Skip ahead a few years to my sophomore year. It was March, right around spring break. We have old cars, and my dad just bought a 1956 Pontiac, and I saw a little girl sitting in the back seat. She was sitting on the right side, facing away from me. Then she turned and looked back at me with a blank expression. As soon as she looked at me, I ran inside and told my mom. She believes in paranormal activity, but she didn't like what I was saying, that we had a ghost. I brushed it off as my imagination, and I didn't really think about it. Until I saw the little girl coming down the stairs into the living room. I was on the couch watching some sitcom at 2 a.m. I had a lamp on next to me, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement on the stairs. I thought it was my dog coming downstairs, but I have 2 Maltese, and they're tiny. Whatever was making this movement was large. I looked over and saw the little girl walking down the stairs and vanish when she got to the bottom. I started joking with my friends that I have a ghost named Sally, so that's what I call her now. Then there were little things like doors shutting and opening, things going missing and showing up in random places. Footsteps at 4 a.m., things falling off flat surfaces, laptops just turning on their own, and cold spots. Our dogs always go to the master bedroom and bark and growl at nothing. Every time I'm in my parents' room, I hear a small clicking noise, like someone is clicking their tongue. My mom denied our house was haunted until she was sleeping one night and felt an arm around her waist. She thought it was my dad coming to bed, but she turned over and saw a small indentation in the bed. Lots of just weird stuff keeps happening, and we've learned to ignore it because it never felt bad or evil. My breaking point was last night. I had a friend over and she was spending the night. We were watching Harry Potter and doing it, and all of a sudden, the smoke alarm starts going off at 12:09 a.m. I thought it was because I had just blown a candle out, so I fanned the alarm and it stopped. All things good, right? Wrong. A few minutes later, all the alarms in the house start going off. I run downstairs to ask my mom what to do, and she said, try changing the battery. So that's what I did. It was fine and working, so we went to bed. Then it went off again at 3:53 a.m. We didn't do anything, we just waited for it to stop. All day today, it didn't go off until 12:09 a.m. It went off for a few minutes, then stopped. I'm writing this at 2 a.m., waiting for 3:53 a.m. to see if it happens again. Ghost experience while living in Texas. This takes place between 2019 and 2021 when I was living in Texas. Me and my wife had moved from our apartment to a 4-bedroom house with 2 baths, and we were renting. One weekend I got a few friends to help me move furniture, and every time we would come back with a load, a stuffed animal my wife had would be on the floor, and I would put it back. I kind of shook it off. Fast forward a few weeks after being moved in, and I was in the bathroom and I could hear the door open and footsteps in the living room. I pinched off and ran in there, nothing, and my wife's little dog was just snoozing. He always barks at everything, so I thought it was weird. This would happen a few times. Fast forward a few months and my son is born. We had set up a camera in my son's room and a monitor in ours. Once again, I'm home alone folding clothes, and my wife's in the bedroom and I can hear the crib rattling, and I see his sheets moving. My son was with my in-laws at their house. I run in there and nothing, and I again hear it 30 minutes later, still nothing. Over months, I would have random occurrences like that. My wife said that she would also hear things when she was home alone. One night, I was doing dishes, and she was in the master bathroom brushing her teeth. She came into the kitchen asking if I was in the room, and I said no. She then proceeded to say that she saw a shadow moving on the bedroom wall into the bathroom. Thought it was me. Fast forward another 6 months. My wife is pregnant with a second child. One night, she awakes to drawers in front of her bed being opened and sees someone that she thinks is me prop herself to yell at me. In the process, she grabs my arm because I'm laying next to her. She then realizes it's not me, and she said the figure turned to look at her and then disappeared. She wakes me up and tells me, so I search the house. All the doors and windows were locked, though. On top of that, both dogs are in the living room snoozing on the floor outside the door. Both dogs bark at everything, so we continued to have experiences about once a month until we had to move for work. One weird thing I might add is that the house next to us had a total of 5 different occupants within the 2 years that we lived there. Each of the occupants would randomly just leave in the middle of night each time. And the next day, there would be a sign for a lease in the yard. So I always wonder if it's a ghost or something that was coming from their house to ours, since my experiences weren't that frequent. Yet another weird experience involving my deceased boyfriend. Today was really nice, 50-degree weather in late November, and on my day off. As such, I decided to make a drive out to Griswold, Iowa, where he's buried. The church and cemetery in which he's buried is located on Junction 71 off Highway 92. Way out there, surrounded by nothing but farmland. This church really has no business being there. It's 5 or so miles outside of Griswold, with nothing really around it to justify it being there. It's quite beautiful though, and I'm sure that he would be happy with being there. But I digress. I pulled up into the grass to park in between some trees like I usually do, as this is where most people park for funeral and interment ceremonies. The album Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd was finishing up as I shut off the car. I look into my rearview mirror above the windshield and I see a black figure quickly disappear behind a gravestone. It looked like a person standing, then quickly crouching behind it as though they realized I could see them and they wanted to hide. It was clear as day, so I investigated thinking that it might have been an actual person being sketchy. I didn't find anything. There's no way they could have ran off without me seeing them. I realized it could have been a bird or maybe a squirrel, but it looked bigger, and the action seemed intelligent. This isn't the first time I've had strange experiences in the cemetery, and certainly not the first time I've had strange experiences involving my boyfriend. Another time I drove there late at night. I had just gotten off work, and normally I wouldn't drive out there so late, but it was the 6-month anniversary of his death, and I had an extreme drive to go out there. However, as soon as I arrived and I pulled up next to his grave, I got an extremely pissed off vibe. Like someone or something really didn't want me to be there. It was so intense that I didn't even want to get out of the car. And like I said, this place is in the middle of nowhere, far away from any human civilization, save for a single house adjacent to the cemetery. There's no lighting in the cemetery, so this place is creepy and daunting as fuck at night. The only light was the moon and my headlights, casting an ominous glow onto the gravestones in front of my car. I drove an hour out there just to sit in my car scared shitless for 10 minutes. I saw my boyfriend shortly before his funeral. I lost my boyfriend a little over 3 years ago in a car accident. I won't bore you with the details, but this occurred about 2 days before his funeral, which was a bit less than a week after his death. The visitation and such took a while, since his death was technically suspicious, as he had no visible injuries externally. Turned out to be blunt force trauma to the head and chest. Anyways, I said I wouldn't bore you with all the details, so here we are, anyway. It was 9 a.m., and I'd just gotten up to piss. I laid back down since I had no business being up that early. And within about 5 minutes, I felt something warm against my back. I thought my cat had snuck in while I was downstairs. So I rolled over to kick her out, since if I didn't, she would scratch and meow to be let out within 20 minutes and wake me up. But I rolled over and didn't see my cat. I saw him. He was lying there, pale and flawless, in his striped long-sleeve shirt that I still have to this day, and his favorite jeans. He had this blank expression on his face. He didn't look at me, he just stared at the ceiling, almost like a corpse, morbidly enough. I was in utter shock and thought maybe his death was really just a dream like I wished it was last week. I went to lay my head on his chest, but he dissolved into thin air. My head hit the bedsheets. I just sat there wondering what in the fuck just happened before I rolled over and cried myself back to sleep. To this day, I still have no idea what it was. Weirdly enough, after his death, I started experiencing rampant sleep issues, including sleep paralysis. And I wondered if that's what it was, but looking back, I never fell asleep. I lay there for a few minutes at most, and was still fully lucid through the whole experience. Not only that, but I was able to move. I remembered vividly rolling over, propping up on one elbow, and going to lay my head down on him. I don't know if I believe in the paranormal or an afterlife, but I never had experiences. Yes, there's more than one, especially like this one, until after his death. I think I have some sort of paranormal attachment to others, and they're beginning to see it. So ever since I was a kid, my mom has told me my family has a history of being able to see ghosts. Well, I think I drew the short end of the stick, because ever since I was a kid, I've always felt like I've had something attached to me. I've moved a fair bit as a child, and no matter where I've lived, I've always experienced paranormal happenings. Lights coming on and off, doors slamming, seeing shadow people. I even once described my stepfather's dad to him, even though he died years before I was even a thought of being conceived. Fast forward to my adult life, and it hasn't changed at all. I have a family of my own now, and even my kids have seen things. But what's really interesting about all this is now even people who visit my home are seeing things. Here's an example. I once was home alone while the wife was at work and the kids were at school. I'm doing the normal house things, just cleaning up a bit and also taking time to get, game once all is said and done, right? I went to the kitchen to grab a drink, and in my son's room, which is towards the front of the house and also adjacent to the kitchen, I see a little boy in overalls, just standing there. Didn't acknowledge me, didn't move, just stood there. And I knew he was an entity because he was wearing a jumper with a button-down shirt and he was literally gray in color. I mean no other color. Him, his clothes, all of it gray. Shrugging it off as it wasn't the first time I've seen a spirit, I got my drink, and when I walked past again, he was gone. Fast forward 2 days later, I invited my cousin and his fiancé over for dinner with me and my wife. It was fairly uneventful, until they were getting ready to leave. My cousin's fiancé asked to use the restroom, so I pointed her in the direction that it was in, which is directly next to my son's room. He wasn't home as he had gotten my mother to watch the kids for the night so we could enjoy an adult evening. She came back from the restroom and plainly asked, "Who's that little boy in the room, just sitting on the bed? I thought your kids weren't here." To which I replied that they weren't. Her face immediately went a bit pale and she walked back to my son's room and then came running back into the kitchen saying that he was gone. Now at that point, I hadn't told anyone, not even my wife, about what I had seen, but my cousin's fiancé described the little boy I had seen perfectly, clothes and all. I then told her of my experience a couple days back. Needless to say, dinner was cut short. A week after that, I'm laying in bed with my wife and I begin to feel a burning sensation on my back. I tell my wife to see if she can see anything, and she proceeds to tell me I have 3 distinct claws, and they're scratches going down my back. They were red and clearly visible, even on my skin, and I'm an African American. I think there's a child ghost in my house, or just following me. I feel as if I don't have much evidence, but I really feel like there's something in my house, or maybe something following me. It started when I was very young. When I was a toddler, I visited a family member. Whenever I was there, I would play hide and seek. Whenever my mother asked who I was playing with, I would respond, "The boy who lives here." There was no boy who lived there. The family member who lived there had children, but they were adults and moved away. My mother thought this was weird, but to be fair, she said I was kind of a weird kid, let's just say that. Even if this was an imaginary friend or something that I might remember him with, but I really don't remember anything about it. When I was a baby, I would have this lamb plushie who would have a voice box that would say prayers. This one time, my parents put me to bed and went downstairs. After a while, they heard a voice coming from upstairs. They went to check, and the lamb plushie left my cradle and ended up in the hallway against the wall. It was saying a prayer. My parents threw it out. My father doesn't believe in ghosts, and even he doesn't have an explanation for that. After a few years, we moved away into a new house. I was maybe around 5 or 7. I was laying in bed. Through the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I looked up and saw a short figure run across the hallway, coming from my sister's room. I got up and looked around and saw nothing. My sister was still in her bed. Sometimes I feel my hair being pulled lightly, and went back and I saw nothing. Sometimes I hear whispers of my name and other things too. Just some of the experiences I witnessed when I was living in a haunted homeless shelter. My first encounter was when I was moving my stuff into a smaller room where my bedroom was. It was right next to both of the toilets, the bathroom and shower room. There was a door with a glass window and a corridor that led you upstairs to rehab. People who overcome their addictions. Through the small corridor next to the stairs was an exit door with another glass window. The building was huge. Every time when I saw through the door leading to rehab, there was always something there watching. This was probably the first month that I was living in the shelter. Nothing major happened during that time other than, me moving into a room that was smaller. So everyone had gastroenteritis. It wasn't nice. I had stomach pains, vomiting, diarrhea. I felt like shit. So one night, like 3 a.m., I couldn't sleep. I had a high temperature, chest pains, and stomach pains. So I decided to take a hot bath to help me. In the bathroom was a bath, a toilet with a small sink, and a cupboard with a boiler in it. This is important, trust me. 30 minutes in, I was relaxed. My chest pains were subsiding, and I generally feel relaxed. Then there was a knock at the door. I shouted, "There's another bathroom across the hall." Still relaxing, and 5 minutes later again, a knock. I shouted again, "There's a toilet in the shower room." Again, 5 minutes later, another knock, and I kept repeating myself. Then another knock 5 minutes in. "Will you fuck off? I'm in the fucking bath. I'm fucking ill. Go away." Went quiet for a long time. I would say around 10 minutes. Then knocking. I got up, opened the door, and no one was there. I'm like, fucking kids disturbing me when I'm fucking ill. So, 30 minutes went by, and I was ready to leave the bathroom. All of a sudden, the knocking on the door was so hard I thought the door would come off. Then the boiler room door knocked and swung open. Got my shit and left. So, there was a little living room upstairs where the bedrooms were. All the girls called it the Dove Room. Every time I would go into that room, I swear I could hear people talking and the TV on. But when I walked in, nothing. Most of the time, that room was pitch black. So all of our rooms had safety guards on the windows, and they could only be opened so much, and then there's another guard so you can't escape. Next to my room was another room. Everyone said that's the most haunted room in the building. A girl moved in, and I became friends with her. Not friends now, though. But one of the staff asked me if she was in, and I'm like, nah. She left ages ago. Why? Her face went white. Apparently, the staff tried to talk to the girl, but instead was talking to another girl saying that she left then closed it. But that girl was dead. No idea her name, but she committed suicide by jumping out of the window. She left her 6-month-old kid in the room. The next morning, they found her dead on the ground. Ever since then, she was haunting that room. There were 2 little girls, 4 and 7, that just came in. I think the mother had domestic abuse situations and had to leave. The next few days later, I was talking to my boyfriend on a call through FaceTime, and I heard the girls screaming. No one was coming, so I went to the bathroom, opened the door, and they were crying in hysterics. They both said a man was holding the door, and he wouldn't let them out. Strangely, when they said that, I looked up where the toilet was, and I saw a black figure. I grabbed the girls and took them to their mother. After a few days, I kind of forgotten about that black figure in the bathroom. So, when I was in the main hall talking to the girls, there was a new family. They had just moved in on that day. She had 3 children, 2 twins, a boy and a girl, and they were like 5 years old and a young boy in his early teens. The little 6-year-old girl said to the other 5-year-old girl to play a game. She said, "There's another little girl who lives here. She's ill and can't get out." we sit on the floor and play catch. If you don't catch the ball, you have to hop on one leg. The thing is, though, there was only 2 little girls living in this refuge before the family arrived, and it was their first day. There were only 2 girls before then, not 3. Within the first 6 months of being there, I saw girls coming and going. It was normal since it was a shelter. I never ventured out of my room at night since the knock at the bathroom door at 3 a.m. thing. However, I was bursting for the toilet. I went out and saw a black figure saying, "Hello." Seemed pleasant, and he looked at me and he said, "Enjoying your stay, ma'am? I'm your butler." I replied, "Yeah, thanks, just using the toilet." He nodded and went through the door. I was weirded out, to say the least. Another family found a house and moved out. There was only one family left in the refuge. One day the twins were screaming so bad the staff had to calm them down. They said in the bathroom there was a man scaring them, calling them names and holding them in the bathroom. The little girl crying her eyes out. "He was naked and he had red eyes. I thought he was going to eat me." He said, and he was going to eat me. I don't want to go near that bathroom. After a while, I kind of understood why so many people didn't go to the toilet at night. The last few days of living in the refuge, there was only me and 2 other women and a child. It was pretty quiet and we were all talking in the main hall. In the main hall, there was 2 kitchens and our laundry room. Our kitchen was separated. You can only go through the kitchen to get to the laundry room. Both rooms were closed off, and there was only one way in and one way out of that laundry room. Me and the girls were just talking and laughing and so on, and then we heard footsteps in the kitchen and going into the laundry room. We all got up and checked it out, and nothing. We all said, "This place is definitely haunted." Something in the road. About 10 years ago, my wife, who was my then girlfriend, we'll call her Teresa, was hanging out with me and my 2 nephews. Nothing exciting, just the usual weekend chill. Then I got a text from my sister around 10:30 p.m. to bring one of my nephews home so we could watch his younger brothers. My wife offered to do it so that her and my nephew were going to head out. It's only about a 10-minute drive. After 20 to 25 minutes, I see headlights on at the end of my driveway. It was Teresa. I thought it was odd that she would arrive without any lights on, and shortly after the headlights turned on, the car raced up the driveway. I knew something was up. I met Teresa at the front door. She came in and immediately closed the doors and locked it. I asked her what was going on and what was wrong. She turned around, and it was a ghost, or rather, she was ghostly white. She said as she made the final bend near my house, there was something white in the road. It looked like a man crouched down in the middle of the road, holding a bag or something. As she approached it, it didn't really move, but she said that she could feel it looking at her. Once she was next to it, the car completely shut off. Lights, engine, the whole 9. Thankfully, she had enough momentum to coast into my driveway where everything turned back on. She restarted the car, drove up as quickly as possible. Took a while to calm her down, but she was finally able to relax. This was the first time that she saw something, and definitely not the last. I think this was the day that she realized that she was sensitive to ghosts and spirits. Not only that, but she gets bad feelings before she's going to see something or someone, and it's going to be pretty bad in nature when it's going to happen. Don't go into the basement after dark. About 7 years ago, one of my best friends, James, was living with his girlfriend, Sarah in an older house. It was kind of a beat-up old house in the back of a double lot, 2 houses on the same plot of land. The house belonged to Sarah's mother, and she let them live there because no one would rent it and they needed a place to live. They got most of their things in, but not unpacked yet. As James brought in a laundry basket, Sarah's mom made mention that there was a washer and dryer in the basement that worked. The only stipulation was not to do laundry after dark. James agreed, but thought it was kind of an odd request. Fast forward about a month. James had done a bit of laundry during the afternoon, but forgot to switch it over to the dryer. It's now about 10 p.m. and he decides it'll only take a second to switch it over, so he'll do it quick, despite the warning. The stairs to the basement go down about 7 steps. Then there's a landing, a left turn, and 3 more. James gets to that landing and makes his turn and watches a little boy run across the basement, from behind the furnace to behind the washer. The little boy wasn't completely solid, nor did he make a sound as he was running. James noped the hell out of there and never went back into the basement at night. This was the first ghost experience he had in that house, but just like the last story, it was definitely not the last. James and Sarah's house. Don't go into the basement after dark, Part 2. It was a random summer night, just like any other, with the exception that some of the hauntings that they had experienced were getting more frequent, and more bold, I guess you could say. James was watching TV downstairs, while Sarah was taking a shower upstairs. While James was watching TV, he saw what he thought was smoke, but in the shape of a person. It passed right between himself and the TV. He didn't give it much thought and assumed that he was seeing things. A few moments later, he heard a shriek, and then what sounded like someone running down the stairs, but only stepping on about every 3rd stair. It was Sarah, wearing only shorts and a sports bra. She bolted out of the house into her mom's house, the house in front of the lot. James chased after her to find out what was wrong. Then she finally calmed down and said this: "I finished my shower and I was laying on my back, playing on my phone with my feet dangling off the edge of the bed. I thought I heard the bedroom door creak open, and I was thinking it was you, but no one was there. Then when I felt someone grab my ankles and try to pull me off the bed, that's why I ran out of the house." They didn't stay in the house that night. Sarah actually had bruises around her ankles in the shape of handprints. That house is creepy. They told me that at any given time in the night, you can hear people talking in the empty rooms. Shadow people peering around the doorways, things move or disappear randomly. James even caught pictures of quote-unquote smoke while there was none in the room. If I can find those pictures, I'll post them. In one picture, the smoke even has a face in it, clear as day. My experience with shadow people. In my childhood home, my mom and I lived with my grandmother, where our bedrooms were in the basement. The way to our basement was laid out, relevant later, was that after coming down the stairs, there was about 20 to 30 feet long, 15 to 20 feet wide main living area. About 10 feet along the right wall was about a 15-foot break in the wall that had a compartment, quote-unquote, which is where my bed was. If you stood in front of the compartment, the right wall was solid, but the left wall was like a half wall that led to what was supposed to be the kitchen. We used it for cat litter, by the way. And where there was an entrance to this quote-unquote kitchen with no door. From the entrance to the basement, in the back left corner were 2 doors, one on the left wall that went to my mom's room, and one on the back wall that went into the bathroom. And then in the bathroom, there was a door that led to my mom's room as well. The first time I saw it was at night. My mom worked long, late-night shifts and would frequently get home around 8 or 9. On this particular night, I was next to my bed, where I could see the whole living area, playing with my Legos. The main living area lights were on. The lights in my mom's room and bathroom were off. The door that goes between my mom's room and the bathroom was closed. It was basically always closed. As I was playing and building random things, I got this strange feeling that I wasn't alone and I was being watched. So I looked up, scanned around the room, and at first didn't notice anything until I looked more closely towards the bathroom. What I then saw was the figure of a person move in front of the bathroom door towards my mother's room, and it stopped behind the front right corner of my mom's bed. I could clearly see that this was about as tall as I was. I was a small child at the time, so maybe 3 to 4 feet tall, and had what I could only describe as wind-blown spiky hair. Not knowing what I was seeing, I freaked out and ran upstairs and watched quote-unquote old people movies with my grandmother until my mom was home. I don't remember much else from that night, other than I ended up sleeping in my grandma's room because I was too freaked out to sleep in the basement. The second incident that I remember, significant because we ended up moving my bedroom upstairs because of reasons, and my little kid brain didn't make the correlation. It was broad daylight. My mom and I were hanging out in her room, and she was teaching me to play chess. My mom's back was to the door to the living area. Naturally, if I looked past her, I could see where my bed was. As she was showing me all the pieces and how they moved and what the objective was, I got that same weird feeling that I was having before of being watched. I decided to look over towards my bed, and I saw the silhouette of a person duck behind the half wall, right where my bed was. I pointed over towards my bed and asked my mom, "Who's that?" My mom looked towards my bed, didn't see anything, and responded, "Who's who, honey? I don't see anyone there." I then told her I saw someone lay down in bed, because that was the only thing that made sense to me. She went over, looked at my bed, checked under my bed, and looked under my sheets. She came back and told me that there was no one there, left it at that, and continued teaching me chess. Years later, when I talked about both of these incidents with my mom, she told me that no, I wasn't crazy. It was just my imagination, that she saw it too on multiple occasions. I guess that would say or suggest that it wasn't my imagination. And it was not just in our house. She said at the same time she was trying her best to stay calm because she didn't want to freak me out. My worst nightmare came true. When I was just a young chap, I had these horrible night terrors, as well as reoccurring nightmares. The difference between the two being that one usually doesn't remember night terrors. I did not remember mine. Part of me is glad, but part of me wishes I could. My brother and I shared a wall between our rooms. During these night terror episodes, I would scream so loudly I'd actually wake him up. We had a decent home. The walls certainly were not paper thin. He told me during these episodes, I was usually screaming for whatever it was to get away from me. Please stop screaming in fear. Things of that nature. I'm sure you get my drift. I'm unsure if my night terrors and nightmares were interconnected. My gut tells me yes. During these nightmares, a little old evil woman would break through my window, proceed to terrorize me and snatch me from my room. I don't recall actually seeing her like a broom or anything like that, but she was an evil old lady and she stole me through my window. So of course, I rightfully named her the Witch. The Witch looked like a tiny old lady. She was hunched and had a large curve in her spine, and she carried a gnarled wooden stick that her hand would rest upon. She wore a brown robe, but it was made of really thin material. Cloak, I guess you could call it. It had a hood. She moved demonically fast, completely unnatural. Often she had a large grin on her face, but it was a grin fueled with hatred. Cannot tell you how badly she scared me. There are no adjectives in the English language that could properly convey the fear I felt when confronted by her. The nightmares weren't always the same, but they were very similar. I could never remember anything after she took me, but I somehow always knew that there was more to the dream. I know that sounds weird, but it was like the memory just went black after she took me. I remember one occasion very vividly. I remember being awake. That's what's weird. My bed was against the wall where the one window in my room was. I heard a loud buzzing and the glass to my window exploded. I can still remember the shattered glass raining down upon my skin. This was preceded by something to the effect of a whirlwind inside of my room. My memory then goes blank, and the next thing I remember was running to my mom's room scared out of my mind. Fortunately, there isn't much more to say about that dream itself. She came, she terrorized, she took me. That was that. This is where I get to the really weird part. When I was somewhere around 8 years old, I saw her in real life. I don't believe that this was my mind playing tricks. Of course, I've considered it, but I really don't believe this to be the case. I was in Rite Aid with my mom. The store had one entrance for customers. The counter ran perpendicular with the shelves. And when you walked in, you were at the beginning of the long counter for checkout. When you walked in, if you looked to the right, there would be the first aisle down as you stepped forward. It went on just like that till you reached the other wall of the store. Perpendicular shelves to the right with the counter running parallel to the left. I went to look down one aisle and there she was. At first I thought it just had to be my imagination. That it had to just be an old lady that maybe looked like her. The thing that really solidified it wasn't even what happened next. It was when I first saw her, she was facing me and made eye contact. My stomach dropped immediately and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I turned away out of fear and she started bolting down the aisle. Not towards me, thank God, but towards the back of the store. I should add that I was on the other aisle in the back that connected to the other aisles, just like any other store. So by the time I have the guts to look at the old bitch, basically at the back of the store, I knew how fast she was moving because I could hear her stick hitting the ground. It was absolutely absurd. In the present day, I'm 6 foot 6 inches, 30 years old and male, and I'm in pretty damn good shape, and I couldn't touch this speed. I instantly knew that this was my moment. I had to figure out if this was something in reality or not. Couldn't believe it, and I still can't believe it. She took off down the aisle at the back of the store that was parallel with the one to the front of where the counter was. I was in the front still. I want to add that the way she ran was in the opposite direction of the entrance. It was toward the far back corner. I ran along the aisles and just barely caught a glimpse once or twice. And then the clicking of her stick abruptly stopped. She was gone. I went up and down the main aisle. I went to the back. I looked everywhere. She was just gone. Of course, I didn't say anything to my mom. I knew that she wouldn't believe me. I felt like, little me was insane, but it was just a daytime occurrence. So I definitely can't forget that. And that's what cemented the entire phenomenon of the witch for me. It convinced me at a very young age that there is much more to this reality than meets the eye. I've searched far and wide, hoping to find someone with a similar experience, but I haven't really had luck. I mean, as far as specificity goes, But the nightmares stopped a while after that, and they wouldn't happen again in a great while. I remember getting a little older and they were fewer and farther apart. The last I had as a kid was quite a bit different, but she was still there. I was in a grocery store, and all of a sudden I looked down the aisle, people just bagging, and there she was, staring at me with that malicious fucking grin. She looked like an absolute maniac, but I didn't turn away in fear. I stood my ground and I stared back. In my mind, I told her basically to fuck the fuck off, and I wasn't scared of her. She kept staring, and my vision zeroed in on her eyes until they were so close I could no longer see her. Then I woke up. The nightmares totally stopped after that, but they started again at another point in time. Can't recall in my childhood years whether or not I'd gotten sleep paralysis. But as I got older, around 20 years or so of age, I began having rare occurrences of sleep paralysis. Every time there would be almost always in my doorway, it would be her, just standing there. Then she would bolt over to my bed and terrify the living fuck out of me, poking and prodding me with her bony-ass fingers while hysterically laughing like a goddamn lunatic. I hate it with a passion. I wouldn't have written this here if it wasn't for this instance in the Rite Aid. Makes me believe wholeheartedly that there's something more to all of it. Anyone can say what they want. I know what I saw that day, and it's stuck with me ever since. It forever changed my view of our reality, especially when around 25 or so I began digging into the web in search of similar experiences. I then heard of a night hag, a phenomenon shared by many throughout the ages for centuries. This isn't something I would ever talk about in real life. I've told only 2 people about the event in the store and the nightmares. It'll probably stay that way. But thank you for taking the time to listen to all this, and thank you for providing me with a group of open-minded people who believe that there's something more to all of this as well. My brother passed away, but he let me know he's still with me. My brother and my best friend passed away unexpectedly in December of 2019. It had been the hardest thing I've ever been through, and I've been through a few things. I miss him, and I always know I will, but it gave me a few undeniable signs after he passed. They all took place within 3 to 4 days after his death, with the exception of one that happened a couple of weeks after. I'm writing this post for 2 reasons. 1, I'm hoping if it'll bring comfort to those who lost loved ones, that it'll help strengthen your knowing that they're not really gone. 2, I'm hoping others will read this post and share their experiences of loved ones giving them signs after they passed. I'm going to write the events out in chronological order, starting with the first. However, I'm not going to share all of them, just a few. He went to bed and died very shortly after, sometime between 1 and 2 a.m. My fiancé and I were in our house, and we were up late as usual. It was about 3 in the morning, and we heard a pretty loud bang. We thought, what the hell was that? I walked out of the room, and there was a sign on the wall. It had been pulled off. Not only the sign, but the entire nail it was on was missing, and the sign was about 6 feet down the hardwood hallway. We've all been together 8 years, and we have that sign up the whole time. It's never fallen off the wall. We bought a house and we moved in maybe a year and a half ago, and it was one of the very first things that we put up, and it hasn't moved since. The sign had metal grooves and teeth on the back, which allowed it to grip the nail very securely. I never ever say things like this because I think maybe this never would happen, but I said to my girl, I wonder if that was your mom trying to say hi. I couldn't think of a logical explanation, and her mom passed away a year ago. Once again, not the type of conclusion I jumped to. The words written on the sign were, "Keep calm and carry on." That's the first thing that he did to let us know that he was okay. It wasn't until next that I learned that he passed that I put all this together. 2 days after he died, my mom, my fiance, and I were going through old photo albums to get pictures to make some photo boards for the service. Out of nowhere, apparently my arms begin to curl up. I begin shaking. I fall on the ground and start muttering in a way that sounded like sleep talking. They said it sounded like words, but they couldn't make it out. Obviously, they both just flip their shit and call an ambulance. I come to about 5 minutes later and I'm sitting on the couch instead of the chair, and there's EMTs everywhere. It was so weird because to me, it was like I blinked and then everything was different. I had a seizure apparently, and the weird thing is I never had a seizure. When I came to, they asked me questions. I was definitely a little bit out of it, and part of my recent memory was gone, but I did know what year it was and who the president was, all those questions. What's weird about this is when I came back to, all I kept repeating was, all I know is I was talking to my brother. I kept on repeating that, but said that I can't remember what we were talking about. This is pretty weird shit in my opinion. I've heard people get regression hypnosis done to help recall memories. I'm going to look into it and try it maybe. Maybe I did talk to him though. Never had a seizure, as I said, and when I came to, all I knew was that I was talking to my brother. Okay, so here's one y'all will probably think is the craziest. 3 days after he died, it was night before the service. I was on my way to my dad's, and we were having a small get-together with family. I saw that I got a Facebook notification. I rarely ever go on Facebook, but the one thing I always do check is my memories. I check them every day, and anytime I catch that notification. I should have seen this post once a year the past 9 years, but the weird thing is that I only ever saw it one time. That was 9 years ago, when my brother wrote it on my wall. I haven't seen it since. Anyways, we both love the band called Tool. They're our favorite. Have been for a very long time. He had posted some Tool lyrics on my wall exactly 9 years prior to this particular date. Another weird thing to add here is that he rarely used Facebook either, and if he ever posted on my wall besides this time, it would have been once more tops. So I'm on my way to my dad's, and my girl's driving, and I open my memories. And this is what I see from him written directly on my wall. Fetch me the Spirit, the Son, and the Father. Tell them their pillar of faith has ascended. It's time now, my time now. Give me my wings. My jaw about hit the fucking floor. There are just so many weird things about this. 1, he wasn't religious. 2, he never wrote on my wall. 3, what are the odds? I could go on and on with my thoughts, but I'm going to spare you. I know in my heart it was him telling me that it was his time. Somehow, the universe allowed this. I've never believed things were destined to be, but this really has me questioning everything. And I gotta admit, I find immense comfort in this. Next is one that may not seem as weird to you, but it was a huge one for me. We were very connected. And excuse me for being even more woo, but I just know it was him. My girl and I got back to my house from cleaning out the apartment. She got out of the truck and went inside. I got out a minute later, and as soon as my feet hit the ground, there was 3 very loud owl hoots in a row from the woods across the street. It sounded like it was so close if it was like the owl would be sitting right at the edge of the woods. There's more to this, but I just want to add that I absolutely love all animals, but I have this weird thing about owls. Like if I could be any animal without second thought, it would be an owl. I absolutely fucking love owls. Me too. I've never seen one in real life, so I immediately was like, what the hell? I know you guys weren't there, but it's hard to understand, but I immediately just knew it was him. So I turned to face the woods and began talking to him. We talked for about 5 to 10 minutes. No more hooting the entire time. I talked in just those 3 so far. Then the last thing I said was, I know you're here right now, but I just want to know that you aren't going to fade away into nothing. I want to know you'll always be with me. Those were the last words. I began to cry like right after that and said it simultaneously, starting to pivot towards the door. And as soon as I stopped talking, 3 loud hoots. Hoo, 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 just like the first 3 when I got out. And as I said, I know it was him. At least I took that as him telling me that he's always going to be with me and he won't fade away. Damn it, now I'm crying again. Here's the last one I'm going to share. This was the only thing that happened in the past 4-day mark for whatever reason. This was about 2 weeks out. My mom and I were driving down the road in my car. We began talking about him. I said, Mom, just remember the words that he told us. Remember the message and the lyrics that he gave us after he died. Then we said something about feeling him around us when we talked to him. No shit, right after we said this, the car in front of me changes lanes and now I'm facing the back of a minivan that has a big tool sticker in the bottom corner of the window. I absolutely did not see this car or sticker before our little conversation. I said, Mom, holy shit, that sticker is one of the bands who wrote the lyrics about it being his time and getting his wings. We just looked at each other like, what the fuck? Then I said, see, he is with us. I highly doubt that that was a coincidence. We were kind of dumbstruck, to be honest. There's a ton of evidence to support our consciousness, that it somehow goes on without our bodies. Many have near-death experiences where they were clinically dead, yet give doctors, EMTs, and nurses and all these things facts about where they were going on to, and they had no way of knowing it. Even things that took place on different floors of the building in totally different locations. Facts people provide after an NDE are called vertical evidence. Veretical. Never heard that before. Veretical evidence. There's more of it than most would ever imagine, and certainly more evidence to support this than it takes to convict someone of murder in a court of law. There are even numerous universities now that have departments dedicated to this sort of thing, as well as evidence of past lives.